As we build up to Easter, let's have an Easter hunt. Now, hear me out. Let's go for a hunt, not for eggs, but for Jesus. More specifically, to find out who Jesus really is. I've seen so many people leave the faith because they were taught about a version of Jesus, which they came to find out was not true. When listening to their stories, it becomes clear that they are leaving a Jesus who is supposed to do for them, instead of a Jesus that is to be worshipped by them. So as we build up to Easter, instead of focusing on the works of Jesus, which are amazing by the way, maybe we should focus on the worth of Jesus first. This, I think, is important because what you know about Jesus will determine how you will respond to his amazing grace and how you will live in that grace. We need to find the Jesus he and eventually his disciples claimed him to be. Now, you and I know that it's all about who you know, isn't it? Who you know gives you an indication of what they can do for you. It's worth first, then works. I believe this Easter, this is the approach we need to take. Because if we know the worth of Jesus, we will value his works. We need to know Jesus beyond his works. I love this illustration I heard. My wife does most of the cooking in our home, but I don't introduce her to people as the cook. That would be very silly and dangerous for me to do. Just because that is a function she renders does not mean that that is who she is. Her identity is not in what she does. Her identity, her worth is in who she is to me. In the same way, whether we know it or not, we've been introduced to Jesus mostly through his functions. We have become used to being told what Jesus has done for us, which is absolutely fine, but rarely have we heard about who Jesus is to us, which is more important, I believe. We have been introduced to Jesus as our healer, our deliverer, our redeemer, our provider, our miracle worker. Those things and more might be what Jesus does, but that is not who Jesus is, and that is certainly not what our faith should be in. The writer of Hebrews tells us in chapter 11:6 that faith is about knowing that Jesus exists, that he is, and only after that will we come to know him as a rewarder. It's his worth to us first, then his works for us. Now, why should we emphasize his worth? Isn't Easter about his works? Sure, his works are on display through his death on the cross, but it's more about what happens after. His death is confirmation about who he is. His worth is revealed in that moment. His death comes to show what Jesus was always trying to get his disciples to see. He didn't spend time with his disciples telling them about his works. He just showed them. In fact, his works came about because those who experienced his hand, the deliverances, the healings, they understood who he was. Both the leper and the Roman centurion in Matthew 8 acknowledged him as Lord first. And when they recognized who Jesus was, when they recognized his worth, his works flowed easily and transformed their lives. The revelation about who Jesus is, this is, I believe, is what we need to celebrate this Easter, because it transforms our faith from seeking his works to seeking his face. There was a Roman soldier who got to see who Jesus was and made a similar declaration Peter made when Jesus asked, "Who do people say that I am?" Matthew 27:54 records, "The Roman officer and the other soldiers at the crucifixion were terrified by the earthquake and awe that had happened. They said, 'This man truly was the Son of God.'" It is safe to say that this soldier would have encountered Jesus throughout the ministry of Jesus, having to keep order with the crowds who would surround Jesus. I am sure he saw some of the miracles Jesus performed. He saw how connecting to Jesus brought freedom to the captives and hope to the hopeless. He would have seen the many works of Jesus. But at the cross, he didn't acknowledge the works of Jesus. He declared the worth of Jesus. Jesus made a statement in the synagogue, the writer of Luke records in chapter 4, and he started with this phrase, that he was anointed. This is a word which speaks about a position given in order to fulfill a function. It speaks about worth. And only after the position is acknowledged will the power flow. Luke 4 from verse 18 records, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." Knowing about the position of Jesus actually matters more than the power of Jesus, because without the position, there is no power. His position changes our conditions. Without knowing his worth, his works becomes watered down. Without understanding his worth, it becomes about what Jesus can do for us only as long as I rub him enough like a genie in a lamp. And when our faith is in what he can do for us, it's built on sand, unstable and dangerous, and it will fail. This is why, as we build up to Easter, sure, Jesus did his work, but we should know that his worth goes beyond his works. So, when people ask you about Jesus, what is your answer? Do you describe him based on his works, what he has done for you only? This can be a starting point, but it is not sufficient. Because what if he doesn't? You see, the way we've been taught is that Jesus always will. But upon closer inspection in the Gospels, we come to find that Jesus didn't heal everyone. He didn't deliver everyone. In actual fact, when people were interested only in his works, they were limited and rarely experienced a miracle. It's those who knew who he was that experienced heaven on earth, experienced God's influence in their lives, who experienced the good news that the kingdom of God has arrived. So here's the question. Who is Jesus? Do you know who he is? Do we know that his functions are not what we are to have faith in? We are to have faith in who Jesus is. Worship first, then works. Just as Jesus asked, so I'm asking, who do you say that he is? Jesus is not just a healer. He is not just a redeemer. Who he is so much more. Who Jesus is, this is what we need to have faith in. And this is what we need to find this Easter, on this Easter hunt.